Alright, so how is Dragon Ball Z, more specifically the combined androids slash Cell saga, similar to TTRPG? Well, as you see here, there are two parts to this. One of them is looking at it from an out of universe perspective. How was it written? How did well, mangaka, who in this story takes on the role that a game master would have running a TTRPG. How did he get ideas for how to create an interesting story? Because let's face it, this is one of the most memorable Dragon Ball storylines because of the array of plot twists it had and just how bonkers it got in terms of uh, one-upmanship and one-upping itself. And for part two, I'm going to be looking at it from an in-universe perspective of how it feels in universe like a TTRPG session or campaign. Honestly, given how long it was, it's like seriously over 100 episodes of the anime were tied up in this. I think I didn't look up the exact number. Anyway, so onward. The two main driving forces were Akira Toriyama and Kazuhiko Torishima. Akira Toriyama is the person who did the bulk of the actual writing. Kazuhiko Torishima is someone that Akira Toriyama consulted with on, is this a good idea? Because Toriyama-sama wrote a lot of different animes and mangas and stuff, and he didn't actually do script writing for his episodes. No. He would just write the manga version, and then someone who's actually good at script writing would do the actual scripts for the anime episodes. And he did this for several video game series too, like Dragon Quest and Blue Dragon, and there's several more. Anyway, though, Toriyama-sama's initial story premise was actually quite simple. But due to talking with Kazuhiko Torishima, he changed it several times in order to make it better, something more interesting, and I guess you could say memorable. And of course, the exact nuts and bolts of what changed is also something quite interesting. So let's move on to the basic story premise. In the original Dragon Ball run, one of the biggest, most memorable things that Goku did was fighting an organization known as the Red Ribbon Army. There were quite a lot of them. The ones from the original Dragon Ball run are the ones in the lower section here. These are Dragon Ball Z characters up here. Some of them are from the Super Android 13 movie, which, whatever. Not going into how that particular movie, but it's kind of tied in with all this stuff. So, what exactly was he going to be doing, and how did the plans change? Well, the original idea was a very vague concept, and he started actually writing manga volumes based on it before he'd actually finished figuring out what he actually wanted to do. And he consulted with Torishima-san several times to figure out, is this a good idea? Should I pursue this line of stuff? And stuff like that. And Torishima-san wasn't actually Toriyama-sama's editor at the time he was doing this. He was someone who had been his editor with certain projects in the past, and was someone whose creative input Toriyama valued enough to ask him for advice, even though he didn't have to. So, starters of what changed. When Trunks first talks to Goku about the androids that are coming, we see this image of this blue outline figure, someone who's imposing and ominous looking, which the anime and manga don't actually tell you whose concept of an android this is. It's entirely possible that this is Goku's imagination only, because Goku remembers fighting Android 8 and Major Metallatron. And this half-formed idea of an android here has a strong similarity to them in terms of body type and so on. No actual facial details are visible, but you know. So, this isn't what Trunks is actually talking about, though. Thing is, we don't actually get to what Trunks is talking about. See, because as I mentioned before, Torishima-san had some... Well, Toriyama decided he didn't want to repeat his own work, so he created new characters that looked different from the things that had been seen previously. These guys, who, you know, not amazingly imposing. This guy is kind of chunky. He's Android 19. Pale, pasty face. By human standards, he's a very rotund individual and doesn't really look all that strong. And then, of course, we have this person who he's relatively tall, but he's, you know, pretty typical looking old man, albeit one with very long hair. Torishima-san, yeah, he told Toriyama-sama that he thought they looked like a geezer and a fatso, and that they didn't really look like proper antagonists for a manga or anime. Well, Toriyama decided to create Android 17 and 18 to replace them. This guy, this is Android 16. We'll get back to him later. Well, Torishima-san thought 17 and 18 looked like just some brats, so Toriyama-sama replaced them with Cell. Yeah, this guy looks rather hideously alien. His appearance seems to be a mixture of Frieza's DNA and Piccolo's DNA. And probably a few other things, but, you know, Toriyama doesn't actually go into any details on how Jiro's computer combined multiple sets of DNA to create this. He just says that it happened and doesn't worry about the specifics. Which is probably a good thing, because actually trying to explain that would be, I don't know, like an encyclopedia worth of information. Nah, too much work to write that out. And that's it for part 1. Part 2 is going to be long because, like I mentioned, in the anime, this is like, what, 100 episodes or something? I don't remember the exact number. So, lots of plot happens, and several very memorable plot twists happen, which, you know, are the sorts of things that in a TTRPG campaign, you know, you have some episodes that you're like, ah, yeah, we did some stuff, we had fun. And then episodes where it's like, holy crap, that happened, wow! And, you know, it's like some of them are just fun, and some of them are like, wow, I wish I could do this again. So, for the preamble, several tropes that get used multiple times through this, things that are storytelling devices that Toriyama-sama uses as part of crafting the lore and backstory for the world, and, you know, the way that the story plays out is heavily defined by certain precepts that are not necessarily what you would call realistic, but, well, as storytelling devices, they work quite well. First off, the unreliable narrator. This is one of those things that takes the form of the fact that no one in universe actually knows the entirety of what's going on. Jiro himself doesn't know the entirety of what's going on because of the fact that Jiro didn't actually create Cell. Jiro programmed his computer to do the gene splicing for him, so he doesn't even know Cell exists. it's a long-term future project that doesn't happen until years after Trunks kills 17 or deactivates 17 and 18 with the remote control device. In that particular time spoke, which get back to that later. Interesting temporal paradox there. Well, anyway though. So Jiro doesn't actually know what's all is going on. Like, Jiro doesn't know why Goku died. He just knows that Goku did die in certain time spokes anyways. There's three to be concerned with here. In two of those three time spokes, Goku dies, and in the main time spoke, the anime series we see, Goku doesn't die only because of the fact that Trunks gives him a medicine to save him. If not for that plot convenient MacGuffin, Goku would have died. Anyway though, I'm getting ahead of myself. But even Trunks doesn't actually know all of the exact specifics. Like, he didn't know who Cell was. In Cell's time spoke, Cell kills Trunks before Trunks even knows who Cell is. In Trunks' time spoke, he never sees Cell before coming back to the present. And in the present, Cell is a temporal invader from the future. That, okay, his past version exists and gets exploded, but no one in that time period has any idea who he is because he doesn't exist yet. Then, of course, there's the whole, this isn't even my final form trope, because, quite frankly, there are several characters who use this. The one that uses it most is Cell, but Cell's not actually the only one. This also has, fights getting interrupted by like, oh, hey, there's this other person who's going to kick ass now. That happens a lot, both with good guys and bad guys. And also, just introducing new characters to the story and reintroducing characters after they've done training off screen. A lot of the time. Yeah, that happens several times. Anyway, though. Also, we have MacGuffin sandwiches. There are several things in the story that are plot-critical things that don't get explained. They just don't. Why? Because they are important to the plot, but their existence is what is important, not their history. So we don't get backstories for them, because their backstories, well, the only part of their backstories that matter are things you can sum up in a single sentence. Like, this is a remote control device created by Dr. Giro to act as a failsafe in case his creations go rogue. Why did he do this? We don't know. How did he do this? We don't know. In fact, we don't actually know what the remote control device actually does if you push the button. I'll get back to that later. Temporal paradoxes. Like I mentioned, 3 different time spokes, multiple instances of people time traveling, whole lot of stuff there. But stuff if it's important, I'll talk about it later. So, first off is a scene where Trunks basically gives the Z Fighters, as their adventuring party is called, a quest. See, Trunks shows up at a specific point in time where Frieza, the self-proclaimed Emperor of the Galaxy or Universe or something, and his father, King Cold, have come to Earth with an army because they want revenge on Goku and, killing Goku's friends and blowing up Earth would be something they personally consider to be a great way to get revenge on Goku. Trunks shows up before Goku does and decides he's going to take care of the problem because he doesn't actually know how this event played out in his time. Again, the whole unreliable narrator thing. I'm not even sure people actually told Trunks about this event, because it's just like one of those things where Trunks just seems so completely surprised by the whole thing, and he just like steps in and does the work for Goku completely, and then Goku shows up after Trunks is done killing Frieza and King Cold. But, this is an opportunity for Trunks to give a mission to Goku and his friends, like, hey, these androids are coming to take over the world, and they'll be here on May 12th in a few years' time. If that date seems familiar to you, yeah. Apparently Toriyama-sama is a Terminator fan. Who knew? Anyways, though. So, after giving them the quest, and also giving Goku that special medicine he's going to need later to avoid dying, Trunks returns to his time period to wait and come back later. Now, at this point in the story, Trunks is acting as a GM insert. Okay. Most of Goku's friends are, what you would have as player characters. Not necessarily someone who is, shall we say, a frontline fighter, but someone who has useful abilities to help Goku when he's fighting, and so on. Trunks, though, is here for, the GM to guide the party in the right direction without actually... Well, okay, he actually kind of does most of the work for them at that point. But anyways, he disappears, and then Goku and his friends are left to prepare for the arrival of the androids, which mostly involves off-screen training montages because Toriyama doesn't bother to write out most of it. Anyways, so what's the first plot twist? Well, when May 12th comes around, Trunks is there to see things because he's kind of paranoid about his parents getting killed in the past and so on and so forth, and doesn't want things to go horribly wrong, so he shows up to make sure things are going right. Well, he gets horribly surprised. See, because Trunks was expecting androids 17 and 18 and sees androids 19 and 20. 19, of course, is the white guy, and this is the android 20. Note how I'm referring to him as android 20. That's a important distinction, because one of the later plot twists is Bulma, when she sees android 20, she's like, that guy has a name, Jiro. Trunks actually talked about Dr. Gero as being the creators of the androids that are threatening the safety of the world, and didn't recognize Android 20 as Dr. Gero. Bulma does, even though she's never met Gero in person. She saw a picture of him in a list of scientists that her father had laying around. Someone who I guess had corresponded with her father or something like that. I don't know. Maybe it's just a book Jiro had read. Who knows? I don't think Bulma actually goes into detail about how she's seen a picture of Jiro. Just that she saw a picture of Jiro in something that her father had, and recognizes him immediately. Trunks doesn't. He has no idea that this is actually Dr. Gero. Anyways, more plot happens. Android 19 fights Goku, then Vegeta, and maybe a few of the other Z fighters, gets killed by Vegeta. Jiro fights Piccolo, loses a hand, and decides that it's, time to retreat from combat. Goes back to his lab to activate 17 and 18, which triggers a curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal moment. Why? Because the reason Jiro hadn't activated 17 and 18 is that in this timeline, Jiro doesn't actually have the ability to control them properly. They hate his guts because they didn't want to be turned into cyborgs by him, but, Oh yeah, that. I didn't explain that earlier. I'm going to use the word android for anything that actually gets referred to in the universe as an android, even if by English language standards it wouldn't normally be considered an android, since it's actually a sort of translation of the Japanese word Jinzo Ningen, which approximately translates to artificial human, but that's, less easy to state. So, 19 is actually, a fully robotic being who would be a proper android in English because, he has a personality, he has a mind of his own, at least in theory. All you ever see him doing is what Dr. Jiro tells him to, though. But, he has, thinking and reasoning capability. Jiro, well, it's a fully mechanical body, but he has his brain in that fully mechanical body. It's not just his personality controlling it, but his actual mind. 17 and 18 are, well, humans with cybernetic enhancements. They aren't robotic at all. And then there's Cell, who is a genetically modified clone and not really or anything kind of like a robot or android. Anyway, though, I'm just going to use the word android because that's the way it gets phrased in the anime. Now, because Jiro can't control 1718, he has this remote control device where he can push a button and deactivate them. It never gets spelled out what the remote actually does, and the way that 17 and 18 react suggests that maybe he had, in fact, actually deactivated them at least once before. If true, this would mean that the deactivation process doesn't actually kill them. Which, what does it do? I don't know. Maybe it just turns off their cybernetics so that they're left with normal human abilities. Don't know. At any rate, though, the remote control device is a plot important detail that we'll come back to later. But, surprise plot twist number, 5? I think. Yeah, this is 2E, so yeah. Anyway. When 17 and 18 are released this time, they decide to release Android 16 to go with them. Notably, Jiro didn't activate 16 himself. Why not? Well, we find out later that Android 16 is programmed to only want to fight Goku. He doesn't care about any of Goku's friends, and thus has no desire to kill any of Goku's friends. And yeah, that's an interesting plot twist. Well, see, Android 16 is made in the image of Jiro's son, apparently, but Jiro programmed him to do very specific things, and, Warlord wasn't one of them, apparently. More like assassin. Again, surprise plot twist. Due to being heroes who are, well, some of them are cocky and chaotic stupid, Mostly Vegeta. Goku's friends end up fighting the androids. Well, 2 of them anyways. See, because number 16, because he doesn't want to fight anyone other than Goku, chooses to stand back and watch as 17 and 18 beat the crap out of all of the Z fighters except Goku. Which, yeah, several of them end up with multiple broken bones because of that. And they only live because the androids don't feel like killing them. Which, if you look at this from a GM perspective, this is basically like the party tries to fight the big bad in the story too soon, and the big bad is like, haha, you guys are losers, I'm leaving now, instead of killing the party. Because, let's face it, while the part where Vegeta fights 18 does actually take a few minutes, it's the only part of this that actually took any time. See, because if you look at the history of Trunks thing, when 17 and 18 showed up to fight the Z Fighters, they basically just ripped all of them to shreds and killed them in a matter of minutes. Which is pretty close to what happens here, except they don't kill them. Now, the reason there's a difference between that is pretty confusing, and Trunks actually underestimates what the androids are capable of because, well, he didn't see them at full power in his timeline. Because, well, in the history of Trunks, the androids never actually try to kill him. They just smack him around for the fun of it. They don't take him seriously as an enemy. Here, though, the androids, well, they know that the Z Fighters are some of the most powerful warriors in the universe and respond accordingly. So, now what? You all got your butts kicked. Well, the thing I mentioned earlier about the remote, Bulma actually found a copy of the blueprints to make one, which takes her a while, but she does eventually make one. But while she's doing that, she finds something else. See, because it's a region where suddenly heard on the radio that there were reports of a whole bunch of people mysteriously dying. Mysteriously dying people that weren't killed by 17 or 18. She finds this weird purple egg. Like, I've never seen one of those before. Yeah, the knobs look kind of sort of like things you would find on Namek, though. I wonder. Yeah, it was this. This is one of the most infamous infographics in the history of anime because of the fact that, one, it uses a font that is hard to read. Two, it's transliterated from Japanese into the Latin alphabet by the animator and not someone who is actually writing something out as a planned translation. So it's phrased differently than the official translations of the names, and also includes things in it that aren't really names at all. Son Goku, Piccolo, Vegeta, Frieza. Or at least that's how you would potentially pronounce them, and it's actually just Goku, Piccolo, Vegeta, and Frieza. And so, Jinzo Ningen, I mentioned that earlier, is that this actually specifically identifies Cell as a Jinzo Ningen. Because he's one of Jiro's creations, even though Jiro doesn't really directly create him himself. He realizes that the process is going to take years of number crunching and tells his computer to do it for him. Because, again, it'll take years. He probably was planning to, check up on it periodically, but, he got killed. And this is the part where it's like, wait a second, if Jiro programmed the computer to do that and it's take years, that means the fully formed version of Cell is actually from the future. And Stole a time machine from Trunks. Wait, what? Yeah. In Cell's version of the future, he killed Trunks. Because in that version of the future, Trunks wasn't strong enough to actually beat 17 and 18. He used a copy of the remote device to deactivate them. The remote device doesn't work on Cell, and when Trunks fought Cell, Cell killed him. And stole the time machine, so that he could go back in time and find the androids in a non-deactivated state. Now, this is actually one of those things I was talking about, is like extraordinary things that are here because the GM decided to write them into the story, and the GM doesn't feel like explaining them. Why does Cell want to specifically ingest Android 17 and 18 so that he can incorporate their cybernetics into himself? Well, that's because of the fact that, well, let's actually go back to Major Metallatron. In the original Dragon Ball, Major Metallatron ran out of power while fighting Goku. He did not fight to the finish. He fought until he got tired, and then Goku just smashed him to bits. Which is where the whole like infinite energy device comes from. Jiro came up with a technology that would allow an android to fight seemingly endlessly. 17 and 18 have copies of this technology inside them. 19 and 20 apparently didn't. And also, the computer that was building Cell didn't have the ability to give Cell one. Why? We never find out. But that is Cell's motive for going to the past, is he wants those infinite energy devices so that he will be able to fight endlessly without running out of stamina. Which, you know, hey, it's definitely a motivation for going back to the past and killing people, I suppose. The time machines also. Future Bulma built them. Not present Bulma. Present Bulma doesn't know how. Present Bulma figures out how to work them and operate them and repair them by reading a manual her future self stored inside the time machine. So everything that present day Bulma learns about the time machine, yes, this would be Bulma. She reads a book written by her future self. Yeah, that's an interesting plot, convenient detail. How did this happen? Good question. Don't think about it too hard. Alrighty, moving on. So, because of the fact that Cell needs to get the infinite energy cybernetic devices from 17 and 18 in order to reach his perfect form, as he calls it, he accidentally gives the heroes the idea to just kill 17 and 18, and then, hey, now we don't have to worry about Perfect Cell ever coming into existence. Well, having a copy of the remote gives the heroes the idea, it's like, hey, we could just use the remote to deactivate them and then not worry about it. Well, this puts Krillin into a situation where he has to do something that, whether you call it a failing a charisma persuasion roll, or being a situation where the player realizes that something the GM asked him to do was outside of his character's alignment, hey, you know, both are possible ways to look at it. Because, one, yes, Krillin is kind of infatuated with 18 because he thinks she's hot and all that stuff. And two, Kurlin's alignment is very firmly in the good category. And while I mentioned earlier that it's not entirely clear what the deactivation remote actually does to them, Krillin kind of sort of sees it as killing them. Whether this is true or not, we don't know, but that's the way Krillin looks at it. He thinks of it as killing them, so he doesn't want to do it. And chooses not to. Decides that it would be better to have 18 alive and just, keep her away from Cell. Which, again, I'm not actually sure if the remote would have killed her or not, but whatever. It's Krillin's choice here, and the choice Krillin made is the sort of thing that, I could visualize a player making a decision like that in a TTRPG. It's like, the GM sets out a scenario, the player chooses the road less traveled, shall we say. Well, it's not the only time. See, because remember how I described Vegeta as chaotic stupid earlier? Well, see, Vegeta and Trunks had been training to get strong enough to fight Cell and the androids, while not Trunks, but Krillin and the others were doing the stuff with the remote device, trying to create one and all that stuff. Well, Vegeta is actually strong enough to fight semi-perfect Cell after because, well, plot happened. Cell absorbed 17, so he's like halfway to his perfect form, kind of, sort of, but not really. And then Vegeta is actually strong enough to beat him. And Cell suggests to Vegeta that, if you want to fight me at my full power, all you have to do is let me absorb Android 18. And then Cell actually convinces Vegeta to allow him to absorb Android 18 in what is, if it was a TTRPG, one of the most chaotic, stupid things you could possibly do. Letting the bad guy achieve his final form, or, well, it's not actually his final form, but and I'm not going to explain why it's not his final form. Let's just say that Perfect Cell isn't really his final form. Anyway, so, in that form, Cell kicks the crap out of Vegeta, and then we get to this. All of that plot happened. Trunks has to fight Cell solo because no one else who is actually strong enough to fight Cell is around, and ends up using speechcraft to talk Cell into not finishing him off, and thus delaying the death of the heroes until a time when Cell can make a public show of it. Yeah, Cell actually goes to a news studio so that he can make a live appearance on national television in order to announce to the world that he is planning on hosting an event called the Cell Games at a later date, so that he can publicly kill all of the heroes on camera. Oh yeah. Yeah, that is actually one of those things where it's like, if you look at this as like Toriyama being a GM, like, okay, so the party has basically failed everything. So now we're going to set up a situation where the party gets one last chance to beat the big bad when they've, more or less failed everything they could possibly fail without actually getting killed off. Which, if you pay attention to the way this whole went, the bad guys chose not to kill the heroes more than once. Because like 17, 18, and 16 actually have no reason to want to kill anyone other than Goku. So they don't give a crap whether Goku's friends are alive. 18 fights Vegeta. It's like, oh, well, I broke his arm. I'm just going to leave him unconscious on the road. I might have to fight him again later, but I don't care. And that logic goes through the entire story arc. Well, certain characters are ostensibly fighting to kill, very few characters actually end up dead. And this ending here is the epitome of that. Cell doesn't actually kill anyone except Android 16. And okay, technically he does kill Goku, but that's actually an accident, and he's not really trying to kill Goku specifically. Okay, that was the part where he decides to uh, blow himself up and destroy the world entirely, but yeah, plot. But anyways, so looking back at this, it's one of those things where you can see things that the um, he, uh, heroes in the story did that are very reminiscent of things that someone would do in a TTRPG setting. Like, you get into a villain's lair. You look at all of the villain's stuff, trying to figure out what the villain's doing and how to foil the villain's plans. Even though, at this point, you don't have an option for defeating the villain, you are looking for one. So, you rummage through all of the hundreds of pages of documents that Giro left in his lab to, find something that's, plot important and capable of allowing you to achieve an advantage against his terrifying creations, which, Boma does, and stuff like that. And of course, then there's those moments where a character makes a decision in the story that would go on to have long-lasting consequences later. I mean, the whole thing with Krillin at 18 is pretty famous for being one of the anime romances that gets started in a very, very strange way. It ends up being very heartwarming because the two of them are actually, a very committed to the relationship couple. It's just that how it got started is strange and very, very not the way things would normally happen in real life, but hey, whatever. It's not real life. But, see, despite being one of the physically weakest characters in the story, Krillin's actions actually had a very, very long-lasting consequence and are, despite not being the person to actually kill any of the bad guys, Krillin's actions defined the way the story ended. Which is one of those things where, looking at it from a TTRPG standpoint, you have the one guy who's a badass warrior. You have the other guy who's, well, I mean, ostensibly a warrior, but he's considerably less badass and mostly just helps out with things. And, then you have characters like Bulma's not a fighter, like at all. She's a tech genius and fills a role in the story more like that of the team's patron and monetary benefactor, because she is one of the richest people in the world and one of the world's most renowned geniuses, which is the reason she can take a look at a set of blueprints written by Dr. Giro and make the device that the blueprints are depicting. Anyway, though, it's one of those things where I chose this topic in part because of the fact that when I was a young man in my 20s, just getting into the whole TTRPG thing, because it's not something I did as a teen. Computer games, kind of as a teen, but even that, not really all that much as a teen. TTRPGs, though, were something that when I started getting into them, I was like, wait a second. What fictional settings would I like to play a TTRPG in? This one, right here. Yeah. This, as a TTRPG, I would have been super into when I was in my 20s. Like, really, really into. It's just one of the things that's kind of interesting, because in the US, not something they actually did an official TTRPG module for. I think they did actually do one in Japan, and I'm not actually sure when that happened. Probably should have looked that up to add it to this presentation. Oh well. Anyway, though, as a fictional setting, I would rate the Dragon Ball universe as a great place to set TTRPGs because of the fact that, yes, there's the whole like big catastrophic fights, but well, even in the anime, they don't have like team fights all that often. It does come up, like Frieza's fight. Yes, the end of the fight was just a solo match of Goku versus Frieza. However, there was a total of like 5 people fighting Frieza at various points in the story. And with the Android Saga, Vegeta, Trunks, Piccolo, Goku, all of them at some point or another actually did a proper slugfest with one or more of the androids. Did they win? Nah, well, most of the time, no. But hey, that's the reason why the story isn't over yet, is because you haven't beaten all of the bad guys yet. At any rate, I think this is long enough. So, please, let me know how do you think about this topic.